Well, thank you very much, Andrey,
Thank you.
for being here. Muchas gracias por esta película. Yo sé que Andrey Tarkovsky no necesita mayor presentación, pero igual voy a leer un poco su sinopsis de trabajo y vamos a dar inicio a este conversatorio que pues lo vamos a hacer en inglés. Yo voy a empezar con algunas preguntas para abrir el espacio y después de eso abrimos el espacio al público para que se sientan en toda libertad de hacer las preguntas que ustedes quieran con Andrey. Si requieren cualquier ayuda con el inglés, con todo gusto estoy aquí para eso. Bueno, Andrey Tarkovsky nació en Moscú en agosto del año 70. Hijo de Andrey Tarkovsky, ha dedicado su vida y su carrera a la conservación y promoción de la obra de su padre. Vive entre Florencia, París y Moscú. Es el presidente del Instituto Internacional Andrey Tarkovsky y director de documentales. Debutó en el año 96 con el documental para televisión Andrey Tarkovsky. También ha realizado retratos documentales de artistas y dirigido espectáculos musicales. Trabaja con la televisión rusa e italiana y con el sello discográfico alemán ECM. En 2006 ganó el primer premio del Festival de Cortometrajes de Sabaudia con Bastignano. Organiza exposiciones fotográficas, conciertos, retrospectivas y la publicación de libros. El presente documental Andrey Tarkovsky, A Cinema Prayer, como decíamos, refleja la reminiscencia de su padre y se presentó en la edición 76 del Festival Internacional de Cine Venecia en el año de 2019 y recibió numerosos premios y elogios en todo el mundo. Well, dear Andrey, thank you very much for being here and for your kindness in sharing with us this unique and invaluable documentary about your father, the iconic artist Andrey Tarkovsky. Well, first question to begin to open. You have repeatedly commented that the motivation and objective of this film has been to recover or meet your father, Andrey Tarkovsky, in his own voice, his own thoughts and his personal relationships beyond the Tarkovsky phenomenon. And you have titled it A Cinema Prayer. Well, even in the film is a lot what's prayer and art. I want to ask you, why a prayer and why cinematic? What does it mean and imply that a cinematic work could be a prayer? For whom or for whom is the prayer?
Thank you. Well, when I started the work of the film, the idea of the original film was going back to 2002, and it was based on the martyrologue, his diaries, and it was a little bit different respect to what actually came out after 20 years. The production stopped, and I picked up it in 2018 with a completely different idea. And the idea was exactly to bring the voice of my father at the first plan, and take away all the talks around Tarkovsky, and just to make him speak as much as possible, to make the audience, the people today, maybe understand a little more of him as a person, as an artist, as a poet, most of all. Because as he said himself in the film, sometimes critics are not really clearly understands what he wanted to say. So I wanted really to make you feel what we, the people around him, our family, felt when he was sitting at the table talking about that. Discussions that you heard in this film were not only the conferences, it was something that was happening at the everyday talks at home or with the friends at the table with a glass of wine. So the idea of the reflection about the art, the significance of the art, was the most important for my father. He was someone, I don't know, maybe it's a characteristic of a people of genius, that they are always concentrated on the same theme, on the same thematics. They never get lost. And it's very easy to get lost in the cinema, especially if you are directing a film. Who works in cinema, you know very well what the set means, what with 100 people around you, how to keep the idea, how to keep you artistic, how to keep the image in your mind when you have to direct very practical things. And I may say that working in cinema in the 70s and 60s in Russia, it was completely different production process that it is today. We get used to the, to see the image, the shot material. Maybe you should wait for a week. You could never see it on the monitor right away what you've just been shot. So it's absolutely different approach and a different technique. So, I choose the title of the film, Cinema Prayer, because my father never thought of himself in that terms. He was a very humble person, so he never say my film is my prayer or whatever. But only twice in interviews he repeated this. I find it throughout 600 hours of archival materials of recordings and his interviews. And I think it's actually there he totally opened up and explained his vision of art, his vision of his approach to the art. So the art is a prayer, but a prayer is an offering. It's something that it's not only this cinematic. It's every artist, every great artist, I think, creates his work. It's a gift. It's a prayer, and it's somehow something that I believe he always repeated also that cinema for him. Although I believe he could express himself in different forms of art, poetry, written poetry, paintings, or music as well. But only in cinema he found his own language, particular language, never unbelievably unrepeatable, I think. So it was for him, art was the means of knowing the world. So it was something that was needed for him to discover his way. To answer those questions, he was always speaking in the film, why we are here, what are the sense of our life in this short lifespan we have on this planet. And it was never the end. It was just the spiritual research for Tarkovsky himself. So his films are just the steps in his personal spiritual elevation, I may say, for him. Now we can say that, of course, but he never thought about that, and he always, strangely enough, he was always repeating, "I need a master." And even like last few years before he passed away, he kept repeating, "I need a master, where is my teacher?" Because he felt he's not enough spiritually prepared, and he kept on searching. So that was actually his characteristic of himself, not been thinking of him as himself as a great artist or someone really like a professor of cinema, but he was very humble in that. And for him, art was just a means of knowing the world.
Okay, well, thank you very much. To continue in that, to get deep in that idea or that action, what do you consider to be the elements that constitute this cinema prayer? In your film, of course, there are images, music, but above all, the poems of your grandfather, Andrey Tarkovsky. There are people sometimes that consider that poetry is only a subjective and lyrical expression, but in other traditions, poetry is indeed the expressive form of the mystics, the way to express truth and life in all its manifestations: joy, sadness, nostalgia, longing, hope, dreams, faith, beauty. Then, is it true that Tarkovsky's film could not be understood without poetry? What do you consider are the characteristics of your grandfather's poems that we have the gift to listen, finally, in his own voice,
yes,
isn't it?
Yes.
No? That are found in this filmic form.
Yes, I thought it was very important to create this link between my father and my grandfather in this film, because I believe that without Arseny Tarkovsky, there will be no Andrey Tarkovsky as a cinema maker or filmmaker. Of course, the poetic structure of my father's film reminds a lot of poetry of Arseny and of the poets of this called Silver Age of Russian culture, which is the beginning of the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. There was a huge, fantastic renaissance of philosophers, spiritual people like Florensky, like Berdyaev, like Solovyov, and the poets like, I don't know, Pasternak and all the alchemists, the Mandelstam. And my grandfather Arseny was the last of that tradition. He was the younger, but how he belonged to the tradition. He was a friend with Marina Tsvetaeva and Anna Akhmatova, who praised his poems very, very much. So I think my father belongs to that tradition. So he actually to pick up that from his father. Nonetheless, the family, my grandfather left the family very early, so my father grew up with his mother, who actually made him possible to become a director. She made him study and sacrifice all of his life to this. She also was a writer, a poet. They met with my grandfather in the 20s, the literary course of Brusov. It was quite a famous poetic course in newborn Soviet Union. And but as far as when my father was born, she just burned all her writings in a stove, and she dedicated completely to raise two children, my father and his sister Marina. And so that was actually sacrifice that my father praised a lot, and he dedicated the mirror, of course, to my mother. But still, the spiritual link between Arseny and my father was very important. So with every film he made, the first spectator he showed the film was Arseny. And that's why he said also in this film that when Arseny told him it's not a cinema that you make, he understood it's a poetry transformed into images, into filmic language, but still poetry. So he said that finally someone understood it, and he was very proud of it. And although in every film, almost in every film of my father, there is a quote from Arseny poems, as in Stalker and Nostalgia, his presence is always constant in his work.
Okay. Yeah. Then, well, my last questions until now, and then to open the forum for all of you. I would like to synthesize in a way, if it's possible, no? In a thought of your father in his book Sculpting Time, and that personally has been my spiritual credo since I read it. No, and this famous idea that is also in the movie. No, in one, I think almost in the middle, beginning, the climax of your documentary. And he says that what motivates us to go to the cinema is time. No? For time lost or spent or not yet had, well, it's the English translation, the quote. He goes there for living experience, and that's why the director essence is sculpting in time. And this phrase, I want to relate that to a thought of your father about you in his diary, Martyrology, that on December 29, 1985. No? A diary that when I have been reading it, but now that I reread after listening to you these days, no, the note of father always loving and concerned about the times to come for his son. Also, you feel yourself with him, like always showing you the future in a way, no? In difficult times, no? In terms of his health, no? I suppose that it was the time when he discovered he was already ill of cancer. And in terms of the socio-political circumstance when he says, and this is the quote, in Martyrology, he says, Andrusha has to be free. He cannot live in a prison, and if we choose this path, it must be followed to the end. Then, what does it mean to recover the lost time? Is this film a way for you to recover that lost time spent or not lived yet with your father? What do you say?
Yes, this phrase was written in, I think, 1985, when the situation was quite critical, because after he decided to remain after the so famous scandal in Cannes, and actually the Soviet film, which was a co-production, Nostalgia was not Italian production, it was a co-production with the Soviet Union, Mosfilm, and RAI Italian television. And the member of jury, who was Bondarchuk at that time at the Festival of Cannes, actually tried to block the film, and he was said, "Why I'm a Soviet director? Why Soviets tried to block my film, which is running in Cannes Festival for the prize?" And then he understood if you go back in Russia at that time, he will never shoot again. He will stay for years without work, and for him it was a suicide. So he had to choose to be with the family, because I was in Italy, I was in Russia at that time, and he just was here with my mother, because she worked on all his films since Andrei Rublev, she was his assistant director. And actually, when he took that decision and he started fighting for me to reunite the family, to bring me to Italy, but it never happened for 4 years. So I was a hostage for 4 years in Soviet Union. So he left through this hell, without country, without motherland, without a child. So it was very hard for him. So maybe even his illness was a consequence of this extreme, stressful environment and suffering. Actually, when he discovered he was sick, and there was a letter between French President Mitterrand and the newcomer Gorbachev, who actually wrote to release me. So I was released in 24 hours when they got to know that he was sick, and they received the letter. So it was also I left Moscow in 24 hours without just one suitcase, me and my grandmother. When I wasn't prepared for that, and when I arrived to Paris, and I didn't know that he was sick. Actually, he told me himself, and I found him in his bed. But we recovered a little bit 1 year, because he lived for 1 year. We met in January, he died in December. This film also was an attempt, because I was 15, so actually there were many things that I had to catch up. He left, I was 11, and certain things that I didn't understand. And now I'm 54, he died, almost 54, he died, he was 54 years old. So this film was an attempt to answer, to create some kind of a dialogue, and to find myself to maybe, I don't know, I was trying to make another connection, to find out whether his ideas, his thoughts, his reflection about art, about life, about our society are still in agreement with them, or maybe I should find some other ways. So I started to digging, listening, and creating this film, building a story. But finally I find that connection, and I have to say there was nothing that actually shocked me or I was in disagreement with. So it was kind of reconnecting my childhood, my memories of him, and finally exactly the final goal was to show it especially to the audience, to the young audience today. And I'm very pleased because we showed this film in many film schools, and many students said, "Oh, we had to see it before, I wrote my thesis or something," because they discovered him personally, and for them it was very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrey. Then, perdón. Ahora abrimos el espacio a todos ustedes. Quien quisiera hacer alguna pregunta, adelante.
Hello. ¿Se escucha? Thanks for stay here. Welcome to Mexico. My name is Luis. So your dad for me is like a person sent by God, like to save the world, and in the same way, to him, sculpting time is like the Bible for my life. So in this way, there is an imaginary about the spiritual life of your dad, like I don't know how to say, like an martyr, I don't know, to save the world and give love and his vision to the next human generations. So my question is, how you keep this spiritual life from your dad imaginary? I don't know how to say, how you live in this world, and what is your vision to keep this love that your dad write and film in his career?
Can you repeat the question? I didn't understand quite well.
Yeah.
In Spanish.
En español.
¿Cómo haces tú para continuar con la vida espiritual que nosotros percibimos a través de la carrera de tu papá?
Yeah, how do you deal to make
Yes.
to continue with the spiritual life of your father after all this that is expressed in the films?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
Luis is
yeah. Thank
Luis
you.
says that for him, well, your father, well, the films of your father is like a god, no,
Yes.
in a way. Then
Yes, I understand. Yeah, I think my father's films. It's something that it's why I choose to speak about Tarkovsky in this film, speaking with his films, because his films and his life is the same thing. Each film is autobiographical somehow, and if you think all Tarkovsky's film is one film, somehow it's one film from these different aspects about the same idea, and it's very autobiographical. And I think when we watch his films, your impressions, your feelings, your how you call it, compassion with interaction with the author, the emotional contact, which goes beyond the understanding of the image or whatever Russian tradition, or whatever, even the plot of the film. It's not important. It's important this context. It's the same that me or other family members or it's something that bypasses any differences. So, Tarkovsky lovers, Tarkovsky people who like his films are the same from here to Japan. We share the same emotions, the same feelings, and the same reactions. So this is a quite very incredible thing. That's why when he quotes this cleaning lady who understood the mirror from the first sight, he always said you shouldn't be someone, a professor or a film critic to love my films. He said my films should be seen with the eyes of a child. It's the most important. Understanding is not important. Understanding in a sense of feeling. So this compassion. Compassion, it means the expression of feelings, and you're not feeling alone anymore. It's somehow the catharsis through union of the spectator, of the observer, with the artwork of the art piece, and with the author who stands behind that. So this maybe explains a little bit the idea of the icon, of the prayer, And that's why his legacy is, for me, it's important because I grew up with that feelings. I grew up with this approach to the art and to the filmmaking. First of all, is the emotion. Of course, you have to learn the craft, but the important thing in work is just to have the right approach with the material, and it's always emotional. So that's why, of course, he said music, as he said, music is a different thing. Cinema goes beyond music, that's true, because it's more powerful but still music is very close, because music, you don't need any degree to appreciate Bach, for example, even if you didn't study contrapunctus. It's something that immediately goes like a flow over you. So this kind of thing was very important. And this was his characteristic as a person as well, that actually what I liked and I missed. And everyone who worked with him and who been with him missed a lot, because this kind of, he was capable to change the perspective of seeing things, Like he could open your eyes on watching, I don't know, a tree, a building, a painting, from such a perspective that you couldn't expect. It was much broader, more poetic. And if we have 160 degrees here, 360, a complete circle. And that was only not in his films, but in his life. So that's something that influenced me a lot. And that's why I'm not feeling any heaviness or fighting against the legacy of my father, because I used to do that when I was 16 years old. But finally finding your way, finding your relation with life, his approach was getting closer and closer. So I resolved that issue many years ago. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrey.
Thank you.
Allá y luego acá. Ok, allá y luego acá. Ok, adelante.
Hi, can I ask the question in Spanish para expresarme mejor?
Hacerlo en español. Sí,
Okay.
sí.
Well,
Nada más si te levantas para que te veamos.
Okay.
Sí.
Okay. Bueno, yo pues cuando empecé a ver las películas de tu padre, pues empecé con El Sacrificio y empieza con una cita, bueno, al principio de la película empieza con una cita de Nietzsche y habla del eterno retorno y todo, y pues como que empecé a indagar más y más y más y más, y dije como de wow, las ideas de Tarkovsky son como muy filosóficas, ¿no? Entonces cuando me fui a esa parte filosófica, después empecé a ver como más películas, y me di cuenta como que había como una cuestión del idealismo, como de esa cuestión filosófica idealista, como un en contra, ¿no? Como más bien vivir, y a partir de la experiencia hacer como categorías para observar como el mundo, como desde su perspectiva, ¿no? Como en el espejo. Y ahorita que estaba viendo el documental, vi como que precisamente, ¿no? Que decía que no era como tanto como el idealismo, sino más bien la experiencia, y que inclusive cuando decía, cuando yo hice la vida de Iván, pensaba, me preguntaron si esto era como una cuestión filosófica, política, pero más bien era como retratar la vida, ¿no? Entonces, que inclusive él dijo, Sartre elogió la película, le defendió desde la filosofía, pero pues que eso no le importó, ¿no? Entonces, como que me gustaría preguntar acerca de este conflicto de la filosofía con respecto al trabajo de Tarkovsky, porque precisamente yo lo sentía como que precisamente esculpir en el tiempo, el sacrificio, ahora que el rezo podrían ser como categorías filosóficas para ver el mundo, pero precisamente si esa cuestión ya iría a un idealismo como el que precisamente Tarkovsky no quería, o si de cierta forma puede ser una herramienta para continuar con el trabajo de ver, de reflejarse, de reflexionar, de vivir.
Ok, muy bien. Sí, lo voy a sintetizar. Ya, bueno, si entendí toda la pregunta, es el conflicto entre finalmente la vida misma y el idealismo, y en cierta medida el sentido de la filosofía, ¿no? De alguna manera. Well, in a way, he says that he speaks a little bit his own experience with your father's films, and he says that the first experience was an experience that he discovered philosophy there. And discovering philosophy, he discovered that, wow, Tarkovsky is giving us an ideal of life, no? More with a sacrifice, with a child, no? But then he says that after reading or after looking your movie, he realized exactly the other side. That it seems that it's not philosophy, it seems that it's not idealism, but it's more life as itself, no?
Exactly. Yes.
Then he was trying to make not a conflict with that. I think I perceive that in his question. Le digo que percibo ese conflicto en tu pregunta, ¿no? To say, well, if not this idea of prayer, these ideas that he says in his books, that art is a prayer, that is poetry, cannot be also some philosophical categories to see a reality, or maybe are only instruments to be disposed to life at itself. What do you think about that?
Yes, I think, yeah, my father was always saying that I'm not a philosopher, I'm an artist. Of course, his works, I think also that there is a strong philosophical ideas beyond, but it wasn't his intention. I think that after we're watching his films and we can discover this philosophical part, as I said before, the link to place Tarkovsky in Russian history, art history, you have to go through, as I said, the Silver Age, toward the Russian philosophers, religious philosophers like Solovyov or Florensky or Berdiaev, not to I don't know, to Eisenstein or other personally film people. Of course, he studied cinema, but the ideas come from there. But it's some kind of, you know, how you come, it's underground humus he was grown within. It's something that he's not was trying to put. I think that if an artist tried to analyze his work before starting a movie, which philosophical ideas he wants to put in there, what he wants to say, whatever, nothing will come out, because it will be a failure, because it will be a very dogmatic work. And there are many examples of that in cinema as well. I think his approach was much more poetic. It's like writing a poem, create something that each film was a step in his life. And when he was ready, when he was really at the edge, at the verge of something, to create something, he was making a film. It was never something that was done as a professional work and so on. So it's maybe philosophical reflection is more intellectual, but I think his approach was, as I said, was more emotional. It's afterwards, of course, if we analyze his work, if we start analyzing, he was hitting it, the word, but we can find a lot of connection. And as I said, that last chapter called The Eternal Return, and actually it was the original title of The Sacrifice. Eternal Return is the dwarf of Nietzsche's Zarathustra. So there is some connection, of course. He read this book, but then I think he abandoned it just because he was afraid to get involved, to get caught in the philosophical or whatever ideas. Yes, there are a lot of good books written, and I think he has his own strong philosophical ideas, very related to the Russian tradition, which goes back to, I think, to Dostoevsky, he mentions Tolstoy as his favorite, of course, but Dostoevsky was someone troublesome author that my father was all his life he wanted to make a film about Dostoevsky, or Dostoevsky book, I don't know, Idiot or Crime and Punishment, and then a biography of Dostoevsky, then biopic of Dostoevsky. It was something, and somehow maybe in every his film there is a bit of Dostoevsky, even in Nostalgia, as I was saying, the first draft of the script, there were parts of the scenes of the encounter between Rogozhin and Prince Myshkin. So, of course there is, but it's not the main important part. So it's more, he was trying to create, as he was saying, an image. Image has an infinite interpretation, so there's no symbol. So maybe we can find it afterwards, but every great work of art, I think, painting, we can take a musical piece, we can analyze it philosophically, find a bunch of ideas in there, but it wasn't his intention, I think.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then, adelante.
Спасибо большое, Андрей Андреевич. Я считаю, что ваш фильм шедевр. Thank you, Andrey Andreevich. I believe that your movie is a masterpiece. I will, because I'm a diplomat by trade, and I am bound, so to say, to ask political questions. And there is an element in your movie that caught my attention when your late father says that the rejuvenation, the rebirth of the Western civilization could start only in Russia. And this is a sort of traditional idea in the Russian culture. I mean, it's not foreign to Solovyov that you mentioned, and many other Slavophiles. And it's not foreign to Solzhenitsyn, another great exiled figure of the Russian culture. But I somehow find it harder to believe this idea after the Russians started the war against Ukraine. How do you see this idea after the 22nd of February 2021? Еще раз спасибо.
Yes, thank you. But you know, he said those words, it was 1986, and still Soviet Union was powerful enough just finished the war in Afghanistan, and he was maybe not able to be in Russia anymore, to see Russia anymore. But I think there's a big difference between the politics, the government, the power, and the Russian soul, Russian tradition. You know, all the best Russian artists were somehow imprisoned, exiled, killed. And somehow the message they survived. Dostoevsky was almost hanged, and he saved just Pushkin, you name it. So I think we shouldn't mix up those two categories. And I think in Russia, there's still, he said, there's still people, there's still spiritual people, there's still. Maybe they're not participating at the social, political life of the country. It's not a Russian tradition. The power and intelligentsia never mix in Russia, and they never did. But there's something that continues, and I think that Russia has a very important role in world culture. It still is and will. I mean, my father Destiny himself shows that he made these 7, 8 masterpieces with the pressure of Soviet regime, with all kind of difficulties, with shortage of filming, shortage of money, but still, it's like, I don't know, it's like a flower that blossoms anyway on the dry field of the desert field. So, and it's something that we Russians get used to. And, Russia has never been a country who experienced a democratic world. It's a different mentality, different thinking. But I think the spiritual idea, the idea of a spiritual renaissance is actually peculiar to every Russian soul. It's something that, a good Russian people, and that has to be beared in mind if we speak about Russia, even now. And that's also the hope for the ending of all the conflicts. And I think that we have, I hope personally that it will end soon, because maybe there's another part that doesn't understand well Russia now in the world. I don't think Europe, after all these years, really understood what Russia is. We need more diplomacy. We need more talking. It's it's something that we have open up from both sides. Will solve a lot of conflicts. And as I said, every war finishes with treaties, with diplomacy. And every conflict, sooner or later, is better than sooner, because too many people are dying right now. So I hope it will end sooner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then there, and then there, and there. Okay. No, bueno, aquí hay una. Luego atrás, luego acá. Okay. Teodora.
Yeah. So, thank you again for being here. It makes me feel incredibly happy and privileged to be able to meet you and talk to you. Andrey Tarkovsky, your father, dedicated his last movie, The Sacrifice, to you. Why do you think that is? And how did this dedication make you feel? What did it mean to you, both back when it was released and now?
Thank you. Yes, it's, as I said, maybe that was the hardest period, and we didn't meet each other for 4 years. I was a hostage in Russia and Soviet Union, so this film was kind of his last spiritual, maybe, testament to all of us, and he wanted to leave it also to me as his son. But I think these words goes to everyone, especially the new generation of people. And as I said, I'm really happy that his films are still been seen, not only by my generation or older generation of people who, of course, met his films, but I see that there are a lot of young people like you are who come to see Tarkovsky, and it's surprising. It's actually gives hope that his work and his poetry and his cinema is not forgotten, but will be studied afterwards. So somehow this film is dedicated to you as well, I think.
Okay.
Well, hello. Thank you for the film. It was really beautiful. And I have two questions. First, how was your father as a person, like in the everyday life? And also, as you have shown your father's film in in a lot of countries, how do you see that their film impacts the audience, and why do you think that impacted in that way? And also, with what you just said about the sacrifice, I really felt that, because when I saw that film, I really felt something very, I don't know how to say it, like intimo with it, and something that was really like dedicated to me. So that's it.
Thank you. Yes, you're right. It's, as I said, it's the same reaction I have in his films, and if we share the feelings we feel about Tarkovsky's film, they're very similar. And it doesn't matter if we're a different age or different countries, different cultures. So it directs to human being. Well, at the end, we're very similar, and the questions and the feelings he talks about, they are so universal that it goes beyond any border. And his films has been seen for many years, and actually what I've noticed, it's very the actuality of the themes, as we said, about sacrifice and his ideas about an environmental crisis and apocalypse, and that just Chernobyl catastrophe happened, and that he was saying those things in 1985. So now we're living them, maybe, and he saw many things in advance for that. So, but it's a characteristic of a great artist. But so I think you're right. The most important part of Tarkovsky's films, it's just this capacity to communicate emotionally and to share this emotion. It's this compassion, which is fundamental for any work of art.
Okay, thank you. Allá, por allá.
Yes, right here.
Sí, se puede levantar.
Yeah. Yes, sure. So, thank you very much for being here. You're a kind of idol, and your dad too. Thank you very much for being here in Mexico. So, recently I got my PhD degree with a thesis based on the aesthetics of the places and the spaces on your dad's production, right? But I realized, from the very beginning that from the authorities of my school, it was a kind of resistance about this investigation, right? I don't know, because the current trends, for example, of the current filmmaking or whatever, right? I don't know, I have my theories, but I found this very huge rejection about my investigation. But happily, I ended, very well, and I got that degree. In your opinion, why is that happening? Because it is very evident, mostly among the young people, among the young producers, among the young artists in general, right? Why do you think is that rejection, of these, classical or very helpful and examples of the classic art and all that stuff? What do you think about it?
Well, I don't know. I don't know exactly the problematics. I can say that there's always maybe the rejection of something that was old, and I don't know, for example, in Russia, the main new film critics just stamp Tarkovsky as postmodernist, something that I think is absurd also. So everyone has his own ideas, but I don't think it's good that you continue to work, but at the same time, I noticed that maybe to the contrary, when there is a lack of someone on the horizon, contemporary, you go back to masters. You have to go back to get inspired. It always happened in history of humankind. So going back to Tarkovsky is it happens quite often, and I think it's a good thing. At the same time, it's actually quite dangerous. It's a sign of something was lost, and that cinema is getting more and more entertainment, industrial, and maybe cinema lost its true its true meaning, as true art, because cinema is very fascinating. The working in the cinema, all this glamorous thing that goes around it, and so many people just go there with the different ideas. I don't think not many go to study cinema as my father did, as many people inspired by Tarkovsky. But I think it's one other thing that I've noticed during the meetings with the people, and actually struck me a lot, that his films actually changed people's lives. Not in a philosophical way, but in a material way. I know many people who became priests after watching Tarkovsky's films. I have them between my friends, and actually saw the films in the 70s. Now they are monks or priests, or completely changed their practical lives, like businessmen or whatever. They abandoned everything, they became artists, and they completely changed their lives. So there's not many artists that can be praised for that, capable of changing someone's life. So this is actually the power not only of Tarkovsky, but this is the power of cinema, of the true cinema that is capable to do such a great involvement in a human life, great reaction.
Okay, next one. Yeah.
Well, Mexico, after the visit of Eisenstein, Mexican movies were completely different. Rich imagination, and I'm sure that Eisenstein as well took something from Mexican culture. Do you think that that mix of culture could have something to do with your great father's work? Eisenstein.
Yes, I understand. Besides the very personal fight between my father and Eisenstein, he said he didn't like Eisenstein at all. But it's only from the really artistic and director to director point of view. But I think every artist has to enrich himself with the different cultures. Actually, my father, I think that he tried to always to find a synthesis of art, of life, and from all the different cultures. And you can see the Bruegel paintings, Leonardo in his films, Renaissance, Piero della Francesca. So he always been fascinated by Italian culture, by the Latin world, and Stalker, for example, is an attempt to unite two completely different traditions. Eastern one, it's combined like Zen and Japan and China and the Western world. It was his attempt. He explained it with the music, and if you remember Stalker quotes, the Chinese Tao Te Ching, and he was trying to find for himself maybe a synthesis to make sense of his life, of human existence, of our future. He didn't believe in a separation. He believed in enrichment of culture from different point of view. But this is very ecumenical idea of culture and meeting the people. It belongs also to Russian tradition, to Russian Orthodox tradition. It's not a closed tradition. It's very open idea. So it also speaks about his belonging to a tradition, but also open up to the world. And like many great Russian artists were, actually.
Thank you. Next one. Hola. Sí, hola.
Bueno, yo tengo dos preguntas. Yo soy músico y más bien me interesa cómo me atrapó su cine y también cómo ha influenciado en otros artistas de otras disciplinas, ¿no? Esa sería como una pregunta, ¿cómo has visto tú que influencia? Yo he visto como la obra de Ryuichi Sakamoto y creo que ahí puedo ver cómo impacta en otras disciplinas, ¿no? Y la otra pregunta también sería como, no sé, este amor que tenía por la naturaleza o esta unión se ve muy reflejada, pero no sé si era algo que trataba de como retratarlo como un mensaje más individual o si quería que este amor fuera universal, ¿no? Esta conexión con la naturaleza.
Okay, well, the first questions while he's a musician, no? And his first question is about how the films of your father have influence in other type of disciplines, other type of arts. She mentioned one, and that's the first question, no? Because I suppose he, as a musician, was impacted by the films, no? That's the first question. Yes. And the second question is about all these messages filming about nature, no? About the natural world. And he asked if this is something only personal to him as an individual, or he wanted explicitly, intentionally to have a universal message about nature and all things.
Yes. Yes, the first question, I'm not a musician, but I think that my father, as you've seen, he studied music, so many musicians were inspired on the films, and he was very careful working with music and the sound on his films. He never didn't give the soundtrack preparation to anyone else. He worked himself since the beginning. Especially the most difficult soundtrack was on Nostalgia. It's very complicated. There were a lot of musicologists who wrote the theses and books on the soundtrack of Nostalgia. Because just transformation of sound of nature into musical score, into the music notes and some kind of symphony. If you remember the sequence of the raindrops in Domenico's house when it rains. So there's a lot of reference, and of course he's working with Artemiev, Eduard Artemiev, who was a composer of electronic music. It was quite advanced for the time, and it was 1972 when he met Artemiev. The new synthesizer, AMS synthesizer, was just created and presented at a special, I don't know if you know this machine, photoelectric synthesizer, thank you, which was actually created a strange sounds and modified nature sounds in the film. So that's why I think he had a lot of friends and musicians and composers. So, and I think the music is a very important element in his film. That's why maybe he influenced a lot of musicians also. But as many artists, you know, it's for everyone it's personal. But as I said, it's this contact and this emotional contact and encounter that everyone interprets its own way. You know, that depends on your own inner world, how you interact with the film or with the masterpiece of art of painting, I don't know, Leonardo, Bach, or Tarkovsky. It's up to you. But so I cannot say. But I think you mentioned Sakamoto, right? The composer who he recently passed away, and we were talking with him about the influence he had, especially Solaris, on his later two works, latest album he wrote. He completely rethink everything. So he returned also to the nature, to the sound of nature, and he was recording the sounds, the drops of water, the wind, and this relationship. The second question is, you know, my father, before he started cinema school, he studied a couple of years in Arabic language. He didn't know what to do, you know, and he was quite a very rebel child. He was rumbling the streets, so his mother, my grandmother, decided to send him away because he was in a bad company. And he went for 1 year in Siberia, into the woods, working as a gold digger, as a researcher of a golden party, of the geologist. So he was traveling with other 5 companions, 5 or 6, in the middle of the taiga for almost a year, without any contact with other people. So it was a very hard life, harsh life. And then actually, I think he met the people who live there this way, live in the nature, completely isolated, and that connection with the nature, I think, was reestablished. Since his childhood, you've seen the picture, he's always it was fantastic countryside where he was spending his summer with my grandmother, and he loved this place. He always speaking about the nature, and actually it was a profound love for nature. He know every tree by name, every leaf, and so he was almost as a botanic. So I remember as a child we were walking in the woods. He was making an examination what the wood or plant was that. He was very keen on that. In the house, it was his beloved house because this house was in the middle of nowhere. There are no roads, nor very few neighbors, and that was ideal way of life for him. He didn't like the city at all. He just had to be there for all his production business. So I think that the relation with the nature and returning to the nature was one of the aspects that he was trying to say, that our civilization somehow went completely in the wrong direction. So we have to return somehow to ourselves and to the nature, to understand it at least. So this also we can feel it from the films,
Thank you. There's another question.
First of all, thank you very much for the presentation and for the beautiful and very enriching documentary. Just a couple of brief questions. The first one is about the sacrifice, and it's if you happen to know if Ingmar Bergman had something to do with moving to Sweden to film, because somewhere I read that at that time Bergman used to say that Tarkovsky was the greatest filmmaker of that time, and Tarkovsky used to say that Bergman was the greatest filmmaker of that time. So I'm curious about if Bergman had something to do, and if by being away from Russia, if you think that your father's approach in poetic, political, and maybe aesthetical terms changed, and it's reflected, like feeling this treason from the Russian film authorities, and if this was somehow reflected in the films after moving away from Russia. And the second question is if you could talk a little bit about the process of reviewing all these material, thinking about them, analyzing them, organizing them. How does it feel to be Andrey Tarkovsky's son and having the same name in terms of when you were reflecting and making this film, how could you feel the shoes of one of the greatest artists? If you could feel these expectations of his films and for the audience, and that's basically it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So about the Bergman, yes, he the idea, the fact that he shot in Gotland in Sweden, it's the island just next to Faroe Island where Bergman lived, just was a few miles away. But it was a chance because when he left Russia, he started searching for money for the project, for the film, for The Sacrifice, and for the Hamlet. I put it in a film because it was, of course, a theatrical play he made in Moscow, but his idea was a film. And he was trying to find the money for both projects, whether it was Hamlet or The Sacrifice. And it was very difficult because, nonetheless, he was Tarkovsky, but, the Western production, he said, I had no illusions about Western world. They need money, they need a return, and so on. So it was very complicated. And at the end, the Swedish Film Institute came out and they financed the film, very strict budget, but he agreed. And he went filming in Sweden, and he filmed actually with Bergman's crew, because the DOP was Sven Nykvist, who shot almost all Bergman's films, and he's, of course, an assistant, the costume designer. It was actually Bergman's team. And, of course, Ellen Josephson himself, one of the Bergman's actors, but I think they already made together Nostalgia. Yes, my father, of course, loved Bergman's films and valued them very much. And Bergman himself loved my father's films. So actually he kept a copy of 35 millimeters. He has a huge collection of 35 millimeters films in his house in Faro, and he was watching it regularly, Rublev, because he considered it the best movie ever made. Although Bergman was quite a particular person. I don't know if you read his memories, his ideas. So nonetheless, when my father went work to Sweden, Bergman was very against that. He felt himself invaded, a little bit, because it was shot in Gotland, where he shot his films, and it was some kind of invasion of a foreign territory. So actually, my father was eager to meet him, and actually, once my friend, the editor, he told me the scene was a big hall after he followed Bergman's conference about the Fanny and Alexander discussion with public, and my father was between the public, and he went out. It was a big hall. My father came out from one corner, Bergman from the other. They look at each other, they turn around, and they left. So that was the interaction between. And then actually Bergman told, I cannot speak with Tarkovsky with a translator. I need a direct, and I don't speak Russian. So that was kind of an excuse. I don't think it was. But that's about their. But artistically, I think they praised each other very much. And I know my father always quoted in his film lessons Bergman, and although Bergman and I think Bresson was his favorite director, but Bergman sometimes he always watched some films. Between starting every film, he selected a few films to watch in a cinematheque. So there was always Bresson and Bergman, like two or three films of them. That's actually the story. And the second question was, I lost a little bit.
Something like how reviewing all this material?
Oh yes, about the film, the construction of the film. Everything started with the recordings, because the films, it was not put in words all over the images, but the contrary, it was the words, and then it's like a skeleton was the narration. So I listened to all these tapes, recordings, interviews, and I tried to create a story, because you have to start with a story. So it was a chronological idea, the story of from his childhood, and speaking about his films, you speak about his life, because as I said, they're all autobiographical. You can find all the problematics of his life and ideas and what he lived through in his films. So that's why I choose to speak him talking about the films. And well, it was complicated, of course. There was a lot of material, so we had to cut a lot of interesting things, very interesting things. So the first draft was 2 hours and a half, and the audience will be completely wasted. So that's why my co-editor, Michał Leślowski, he also co-edited this Sacrifice. He helped me a lot. He said, cut this, and I wasn't able to do that. He said, no, you have to cut. So he helped me a lot to shorten the film in an actual form. And then, of course, the images we shot at the places where he shot his films, in Italy, in Sweden, in Russia, in his country house. And I really wanted to show that the relationship between the shots from the films, like The Mirror, Stalker, and Solaris with the countryside. He never wanted to shoot there because he didn't want to spoil or bring there the team and ruin his small paradise. He hid himself from the world. But he always tried to find the nature and the places very similar, like all the fogs we see in his films. It's something that he used to see from the window of his country house. So it's every shot is autobiographical. Every dream he dreamt is the dream that we see in the film. There's nothing fictional. He didn't believe in fiction. He said that everything is matter. So we have to operate with matter, with your own experience. Otherwise, the other people will always understand that you're lying. You're inventing something that's not true. To be true, you have to really show only your own experience and trying to put them in images. It's very important, because something you felt, something you lived through, the other people will be able to understand. If it's just a fantasy, it's not understandable, so it won't be accepted. So that was actually the idea that and how I worked on the film. And as I said I never actually had an idea to be this film was somehow the, I could say, because my DOP, Alexei Naidyov, made a lot of family chronicle pictures throughout my childhood with my father, with our family, someone who lived with us for many years. And Michel Islovsky, the editor, also was a good friend of my father. Actually, he made himself a fantastic documentary after my father died. It's called Directed by Andrey Tarkovsky. It's about the sacrifice backstage. So we were someone who we got together and we said how we can remember, once again, put our memories, our emotions about my father, revive them again. So that was very creative and very nice environment to work with. It wasn't like a cinema production. It was us meeting together, talking and remembering. And it was very important for us as well to go back in our to remember my father, who actually had a lot of influence on them as well as of course, on me. So, and I'm not feeling that I'm being in Tarkovsky's shoes because it's impossible. So, but I think that I had to do this for myself, this film, because it's something that, of course, the choice of words is mine. Of course, the question he's talking about is something that I was asking myself when I was interested in. So that's where I, myself, as a director, as a person, ends, and then he starts, he begins.
Okay.
Thank you.
Adelante. Sí.
Hello, thank you for being here. I'm going to read it so I don't get confused. But my question is, do you think the vision you have of your father has changed through the years? I mean, would you say the idea or the perspective you had of him and his work is different now than it was when you watched his films for the first time? Or like, how would you describe your life journey in relation to his work and his art?
Okay. I don't think so. I think my idea, my relation with his film is something, of course, those films he was creating at home, of course, it's something that we lived through. It was part of my life, so. And my idea of my father, especially, it's the idea of a human being, not of an artist. So his films is somehow the manifestation of his inner, in our inner world, in the family, in environment, and that never changed. For me, there are a lot of autobiographical, some facts, some shots, some scenes that actually taken from our life, which were very dear to me. But for the rest, this is his work and I remember he's a human being, very nice human being, very nice father, loving. He was a very loving person, very sharing one, so someone who was able to keep you, under his charm forever. So that is something you keep on missing in your life, and that's actually still missing because. And I find him as a person and father in his work. So, and I don't think anything changed. Actually, as I said, when I watch his films, and believe me, I watched them many times to edit this film, I go frame by frame all of his films. And when you start to watch it again, it's like every time it's a new experience, because we change, something within us changes, time passes, you're different in your mind, you're in a different emotional state. So, I don't know, there always something to discover. As we were talking with Rafael, yes, about the scenes, that there's some shots, some particular images that you said, that I missed them after all these years. But that's the magic of cinema, magic of Tarkovsky, that there's something always new, something very fresh and renovating in his work.
Okay. Bueno, sé que hay como 5 preguntas más. Bueno, entonces, estas 5 preguntas más y adelante. Adelante.
Well, hi. First things first, thank you for making this projection possible. And next, well, I was very surprised or moved by the fact that both of your parents either built or restored your home in Moscow, considering how the symbol of home is represented in all of your parents' filmography, well, your father's filmography, but in hopes to elevate the role of the mother and your mother. As your father said, he was very inspired by, the fact of his father being a poet shaped his life. So how would you say that both of your parents' artistry shaped yours, respectively?
Thank you. Yes, about the home, it's something. The home is a kind of. It's a big question with Tarkovsky in the home, because it's actually his home. He never had a home. You know, the house where he was born was after a few years. He was born. They built a huge dam, so that it was flooded. And actually, when he was shooting The Mirror, he went to the set and he said, "You never have returned." He never find anything. It was underwater. So until 1970, he didn't have a house, apartment, nothing. He lived with my grandfather, with my mother's house, you know, the small apartment in Moscow. Then finally, they built a house in the countryside. It was his first house, and that's why he loved it so much. And then the idea of the house came out also in Solaris. It was inspired by this first new acquired. And actually, the story of the house is Alexander told to the little boy in the sacrifice. I defined the house between the woods. Just get lost in the woods. They came out. Very romantic idea. And then actually he said, if I lose this house, I will never have it. And that happened, because he came to Italy. He lived in different places, different rental homes, and he bought the houses. Actually, Rocalbenia, the last place was that you've seen in the epilogue. It's the house he wanted to build under this big oak tree he just adored. It's also isolated it's in Tuscany. But he made the drawings, and up in the drawings there's written, "In the house I will never see." So actually, as I said, that it was like a prophecy in this interview. It was the interview of the 70s, and he said that if I lose this house, I will never have any other. So in Sacrifice, he burns the house. So there's no more, nothing left for him to be. So this relationship with the house is very important, and very painful relationship for him on that. And the other part. Is that a part of the question? Or?
I also asked, how do you feel that both of your parents' artistry has had a role on your life?
Well, of course you get influenced, because somehow he shaped my grandfather, poetry, and figure shaped my father. My father shaped me. It's inevitable. You cannot just get against escape it. It's something that, as I said, you may have in your youth some rebellion, as we all do, but it's never been a profound, because we had my connection with my father was very strong, much stronger than with my mother, I should say. So I was more related with him, and it was an emotional, a very profound level for him as well. And that's why this separation, this 4 years for him was very painful, of course, and for me. So somehow he shaped me, because he took me in when I was small, 2 kids, and he started teaching me paintings, and he's talking about Bach and all this kind of overwhelming things that I didn't understand at that age, but it was this abstract and subconscious abstract he created within me, and so he shaped me somehow. And I'm really thankful for him. He somehow, to a certain point, opened my eyes and to understand the beauty and the ugly, and the good and bad. So it's something that every parent should do, and he did it in a magnificent way without any pushing or teaching. Never. He said you can never teach a child to do it, this or that. You just should open his eyes and then make him choose. But you should trust the child. So he's quite have a particular relation in the films with the children, and a young actor as Burlaev, the boy in And then Ivan's childhood and the bell of Andrei Rublev is still completely under the spell of Tarkovsky, even now, even today. So he was completely reshaped by my father.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then
hi.
Three more. Yeah.
So it seems that your father has, or like had a very, he placed a lot of importance in the perspective of children and like their opinions and their emotions and like what they saw. And I wanted to ask you if you can recall any moment in your life where your father asked you for your opinion or you for your perspective and how you felt it affected him.
I don't know how it affected. He never shared it with me, but yes, you know, we used to look through the art books, of course, since I remember myself. Maybe I was 3-4 years old, and this old Leonardo and Piero, you know, all the Renaissance painter said, "Do you like this? Do you like this subject? Why you like this?" And then he made me draw the little things, you know, that inspired by these paintings. And I think it was for him how a child reacts to a certain piece of music. For example, he was constantly listening to the St. Matthew Passion by Bach and Johanna. Those two musical works by Bach, I remember there was 3. I remember them every part because it was like constant listening, and I enjoyed it very much. So then he was telling me, discussing me, telling me the parts, the violin and an organ, the choir, what he was doing. So that was very interesting, and every day he gave me a new book to look to new artists, but not only the Renaissance, Dali and you know, Impressionists or whatever. Even he didn't appreciate them, but he wanted to give me the complete horizon of the art painting history. Unfortunately, there was no way to see the films when you were walking to see the films, and the once I remember I was maybe 10 maybe 1981, 1980. He organized a projector. A young director came to him asking for help. He brought his 35mm print of his film. It was his first film, and we went to projection. It was only 3 of us, me, my father, and it was Alexander Sakurov. It was his first film. And after projection, it was a very dim film. It was after the story by Platonov. There is a story of suicide, and I was like 9, 10. But my father said, "Okay, you can watch the film." And then we came out, and my father looked at me and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Dad, it's too dim. I don't know, it's depressing." He looked, and he said, "Well, yes, you're right, but there's something there, you know." And since that's something there, he really, you know, they became friends. He really tried to help Alexander Sakurov to work in the cinema, because he was totally, you know, pressed under the pressure. So he was quitting. So that was actually the first time they met, and that's, I remember, the first time he asked me my opinion, I think. Thank you.
There's how many questions more? 2 más. Okay. 3 más. Okay. Okay. Yeah. No.
Okay.
No.
I was wondering.
¿Te puedes levantar para verte? Sí.
In the book Sculpting Time, your father speaks against the Eisensteinian view of cinema, the theory of filmmaking, and he speaks about this way of not cerebrally interpreting art, but feeling it like an emotional connection. And I was wondering, do you think that your father thought about his own life as a sacrifice for cinema or art? And also, if so, if this is the reason why his art was considered so subversive for the USSR?
Regarding Eisenstein, yes, they are very different directors. You know, Eisenstein is a director of montage. It's very also philosophically analytical, very precise in montage. And my father always showed, I don't know how to call it, piano sequenza. It's completely different. So it's actually was the interaction with time that my father was agreed with Eisenstein, because he said it's not a human time, it's artificial time. That's why actually modern cinema is more and more, I think, totally Eisenstein style. So few directors work with piano sequenza and trying to reach the human dimension of time, you know, that was he's always talking about, because actually the English translation of the book Sculpting in Time is not correct. In Russian it's запечатленное время. It's the time that it's a captured time, the time captured on the film. You not actually, you capture time, you don't modify it, you just find the right flow of time. Because sculpting means violence, you know, it's something that you really have to break like a stone, but he wasn't, I think it's more Eisenstein style title than correct one. It's but we never corrected it, but actually I think it's very important to understand. And well, he believed in that the art, you have to dedicate yourself as a service. As of a service, you have to serve. And as he said, there's no other choice in your life, you know. Or you choose to be served by the others. So you take power, you get violence, you push on the people. And so that if you have to be servant of your art, you have to serve them totally. So you sacrifice, of course, everything. You sacrifice your wealth, because he never made a movie to make money. He never received a lot of money. All his life he was struggling to pay his debt. But he believed that there are other important things more than wealth and even family, because of course his decision to stay abroad in Italy to work, to make his films and separated from me, from a family, from the people, friends, and it's extreme sacrifice. And actually, but he understood if he will be there in Russia, he will be dead as an artist, and he couldn't do that. So that also the sacrifice. And well, the last film, of course, explains very well his idea of what an artist is and how life must be according to his ideas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question.
Buenas noches. Bueno, mi nombre es Emanuel. Mi pregunta es variada hacia los sueños y cómo Tarkovsky veía los sueños como una interpretación espiritual, ¿no?, de uno mismo. Mi padre murió hace 9 meses de cáncer y me embarqué en una búsqueda desesperada, ¿no?, en los sueños para encontrar respuestas. Entonces mi pregunta es más personal hacia él, y si de alguna manera Andrey había buscado y encontrado respuestas en sus sueños sobre la relación con su padre y sobre su vida en general. Gracias.
Yeah, well, how your father think and managed to capture dreams in his films. That he saw that if he has a way of interpreting or access to spirituality in dreams, because he said that he just have his father has just died. Spiritual search in dreams, and then the question is if you, Andrey, no, have this search in the dreams of films.
Well, I think that for him, dreams, as I said before, it was some experience that it was his dreams that he filmed, something that he lived through, that he dreamt. As he said, he was someone who was dreaming very often, beautiful dreams, particular dreams. So there was this gift of dreams, and he was able to put it in a film. But I think it's just, as we said before, it's a capacity to see his reality that we see every day, it surrounds us, we see with our eyes. I think it's much broader than we're able to see, but there are people who are able to see it much larger. It's like the larger spectrum, and the artists are capable of the spectrum, to see. And so the dreams for him was reality as our everyday life. So maybe he didn't distinguish that, and he really believed. In his diaries everywhere he always quotes, and he wrote down all his dreams because it was something very important for his work. He believed in his dreams, actually, what has been said, and actually he behaved accordingly afterwards. And yeah, I don't know how he achieved it technically, but as I said, we all, I think, wonder how he managed to do that. But it's a secret of an artist. I think it's one of his capacities that even Bergman envied very much. And he said that he couldn't go to that room that Tarkovsky was dwelling quite freely, and he could see just at the keyhole of that room. And it was Bergman who said that. So, of course, but I think it's this capacity, as I said, this incredible poetic view that opens the horizon, and it's a gift, and few people could have it, and few I think great artists all have this gift, and you cannot acquire it with technique, or you cannot acquire it with work, unfortunately, is you are chosen. And the most important thing that when an artist or a person understands that and starts to serve it, through genius is born, because sometimes people just abandon this and couldn't follow it. And he was very careful to understand that. So it's not self-praising that he was thinking of himself as a great artist, but the people on the set, and when he was making his film, everybody said we were totally concerned with making masterpieces. So involvement of the people, because film is made not only by a director, but the actors, the crew, DOP, everyone around were working for something great, And my father was capable to move them, to push them, and make them believe that they're working on something unique. It wasn't so the team could shoot for 48 hours with no stop, with no pause for lunch or whatever. No, and it was usually until the shot is done, you do nothing. So it was an artistic approach even for the team, and as I said, so he was very concentrated and being able and gifted by this gift. So he said, "I have to serve it." So that's also been, that's why sacrifice and the idea of sacrifice.
Okay, then maybe it's the last question.
The first.
Another one. Okay, two questions more. Okay.
Gracias. Pues yo quiero agradecer muchísimo el documental de Tarkovsky hijo. Es un extraordinario acercamiento a la obra, pero también es una especie de work in progress. Nos acerca al autor, nos acerca a su proceso creativo, y el hecho de escuchar su voz en que dirige los filmes también es algo extraordinario, muy valioso. Que nos diga, que oigamos de su propia voz este intento, estos objetivos de encontrar la imagen en contraste con lo místico, con lo misterioso, hablar de las alegorías, del tiempo, del silencio, la verdad es un privilegio. Quiero felicitarlo y quiero agradecerle muchísimo que nos acerque con esta otra mirada los filmes de Tarkovsky, y esto nos obliga placenteramente a regresar a sus películas ahora con otros ojos, con otro tipo de lectura también, a partir de la propia voz del autor, de la propia voz del creador. Así que Molto grazie.
Thank you very much.
Well, in a way, well, I cannot repeat all the discourse, but well, you can feel the emotion that is more grateful discourse she was saying about that was being a privilege, grace in a way to see this documentary, to see Tarkovsky in his voice, to see him directing, to approach this. He was grateful of this approach, no, to almost to touch Tarkovsky, I could say, no, and this obligates us now to see the movies with another side, with another vision. No, that's it, in a way. Thank you.
Gracias.
Hi, good night. I'm Andrey. I'm an actor, so I'm very interested in how was your father's work with his actors. I mean, how was the creative process to create the characters? I don't know, he does table readings or what he really does to take all these emotions from his actors.
Yes, it's a nice question, and as you noticed, he always worked almost with the same actors through his life, and because it was inevitable that someone who worked with Tarkovsky, or they worked with him, they loved him, or they just couldn't work with him, just they left. So it was a question of a very strong relationship and friendship. And I think with every actor, there was a different approach because each human being is different. So he was this ability to push the actor and understand the personality of an actor. So actually it all started with of course, for the choice of actor, you do a casting, normal casting, as all we do. But then he spent time with the person to know. It was also with, for example, for DOP, or like in Italy, for Pelanci, they spent like 2 months. My father just working dinner, walking around, talking about art, not about the films, especially not about the script. So it was knowing each other, and then actually he find the key how to push emotionally the actor to act. And then of course some actors were more difficult to work with, some other were, for example, the boy in Ivan's childhood, especially on Andrei Rublev and the Bell, he couldn't find it. He was young and a little bit stubborn. And so he had to put him this very strong emotional state of uncertainty because he was preparing a bow. He didn't know that they cut his head. Actually build this because he had no secret of bell casting. And so my father couldn't manage to put him on the right so he actually asked the second director to tell him that he's awful. He's acting awful, and he wants to kick out from the film. So he's just shooting the last scenes, and then he had to go throughout the whole shooting process. So he was so upset emotionally, and actually perfect on the set. So the last scene when he's crying, I think it's just real, true, emotional explosion after all this. But he understood that afterwards, and he was grateful to my father. He said it was cruel, but he achieved this goal. And my father said, I understand. As for example, he had a lot of problems with Chris Kelvin, the Donatas Banionis on Solaris, the main character, because Donatas was coming from a traditional, he was already very mature actor, theatrical actor, Stanislavski system, and he wanted to understand the plot and everything on that. And my father hated that because he didn't believe much in Stanislavski, because Stanislavski system works for Stanislavski. Every director has to find his own approach to the actor. And there he had a lot of difficulties, but finally he understood, and it worked out quite well. As for Terehova in the Mirror, she was an actress. He wanted also to put her in quite very stressful, nervous state, and well, she never gave her a script. He was given her scene. She was given a scene every day on the set, but she never read the script of the film. since from beginning to an end. So she never knew what's going on. So many also on Stalker, the other guys, he didn't give it to them. So he said that actors must completely be, believe the director. So they, like a children, they have to give themselves up to the director. So if they do that, so they will manage to work with my father. And actually, his favorite, Anatoly Solonitsyn, was the actor that worked throughout his life, through all his films. And can you imagine? There was Andrei Rublev was one of the biggest production of the time. They started in 1964. The casting throughout the whole Soviet Union. The greatest artists, the Russian Soviet artists, were someone. And Anatoly was a young actor in a provincial Sverdlovsk theater. So actually, what he did, he actually quit his job. He left the theater. With 2 rubles in his pocket, went to Moscow for the casting. And he said, I will be Rublev. He came for the casting. Actually, my father didn't like him much, and he said, maybe not, no, you don't know. But then, after a few tries, my father said, okay, this is the only Rublev that I want. So actually, he played it all. He gave it all. He wasn't, when you license yourself from a theater, you could hardly find a new job. And so he went through the shooting and through the film, actually, with the only money he received on the set for the dailies. And since then, they became very good friends. And then he understood that once he couldn't manage how to approach Tarkovsky, then one night they talked, they drank, and he said, I understood that I have to completely be free, and I do just what he said me to do. And that actually was the way he worked with Anatoly Solonitsyn. So every actor has its own, but they all were under the spell of my father. There was no way that they could. They just wanted to do what he wanted to do. It was so emotional, so the idea of the film that they were trying to help him all the time. So it's all different. It's all different approaches. There were some actors. He said they were fantastic, like the Freundlich in Stalker, the Stalker's wife. He said he never made any first shot of her monologue at the end of the film. It was like a first try. And my father said she's an actress. She could interpret the table. If you ask her, she's capable to do everything without any explication. She's perfect. But it's a gift not all the actors have. So it's different stories.
Well, then, to end is, bueno, lo voy a decir en español, and then in English. Solo me queda darle las gracias a Andrey Tarkovsky de habernos vuelto a decir, to remind us with your movie, as your father said, as you say there, that belief is to know through love, through cinema, in a way. No? Thank you very much, Andrey. No?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Gracias. Thank you, Rafael, for inviting me.